I understand that there's this weird allergic reaction that Jews have to the Israeli flag and like things like the word Zion. I don't know why.
I think it's a lot of just misunderstanding of what these things are. All Jews are Zionists. By definition, you have to be a Zionist because Zionism is not something that Herzl started. All we have today in Eretz Yisrael dates back 100 years before Herzl was even born. We had the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon both attempted themselves to come on Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. So there was a Rav here in Bnei Brak. His name was the Chazon Ish. Once Hakomas HaMedina happened in 1948, he stated, it's written in the books, he stated that this is the end of the Golus. People don't understand the enormity of what they're seeing. If you understand that that the Geula is unfolding literally before our eyes, there's no reason to live in Lakewood anymore. For the first time in 2,000 years, we have dozens of families of Kohanim that are living in and around the old city of Yerushalayim with Bigdei Kahuna inside their closets, ready to do the avoda. We have rebuilt all of the kelim in the Beis Hamikdash. Only in Eretz Yisrael, when a war breaks out, a major war in a country, all of its citizens, 200,000 Israelis, are doing whatever it takes. They're coming through Egypt, they're going through Jordan, they're coming through boats from Cyprus. However they can come back to Eretz Yisrael.
We're not getting used to missiles, we're getting used to miracles. And Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael, they recognize that. And when missiles are flying and they just happen to have been in America for some trip for some reason, they're like, no, I don't want to miss the miracles. So they don't see missiles, they see miracles. Welcome back to another episode of Homebound to Eretz Yisrael podcast, where we talk about Eretz Yisrael. Now, today we have a particularly special and important individual, Rabbi Mr. Josh Wander.
I've been called worse.
Yeah, just to show, we were just discussing what your title is, so we're just going to show your business card. Josh Wander is a redemption expediter.
Indeed.
Bring them home. That's IsraelTorah.org. Check out some of Josh's stuff. There's no really good title or way to introduce you, so we're going to get into it, and then people will just find out who you are and what makes you unique, highly unique, to say the least.
Eclectic.
Josh is an amazing human being. So let's just get into it because it's hard to even know where to start. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you live is just is a nice way of getting into a little bit who you are and what you represent. So tell us where you live, where you're from, and we'll hop into it that way.
Okay. I live, first of all, thank you, Michal, for having me on the show. I live for some people, I say I live in the 5 towns. For other people, I live in the Upper East Side of Jerusalem, that is. I live on the Mount of Olives on Har Zeisim. We have 5 thriving Jewish communities. I live in the largest with about 1,000 Jews.
Just for those who don't know exactly what it is, that's East Jerusalem, right? Is
that could be a podcast in itself, what East Jerusalem is. And I don't use that term, but...
that's how people would refer to it. People, like the same way you say...
The old city and the Kosel is all part of Eastern Jerusalem. That's all.
Josh lives on the side where the Arabs live. I just want to make that clear, because not everyone understands that.
So we have a very large temporary Arab population, and as Jews move from Brooklyn and Lakewood and Monsey, they move out as part of the transfer of populations agreement we have with them. So we're just waiting for the Jews of America to replace them. It's happening, just slower than we would like it to happen. Where am I from? So I often tell the story when people ask me where I'm from of someone who's buried on top of our mountain. He was the first Israeli to win a Nobel Prize. His name was Shai Agnon. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature. So when he went to collect his Nobel Prize from the King of Sweden, so he immediately said the bracha one makes when you see a king, and he translated it, and the king was duly impressed by this. And during the dinner, the king came over to Shai Agnon and said, "Then where are you from?" And without hesitation, he answered that I was born in a small town in Russia, in Bochach, but he said that was only in a dream. For in reality, I'm from Jerusalem, and I was exiled by Titus 2,000 years ago. So all Jews are from here. We just got lost in different places in the exile. I was born in a place called McKeesport, Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, but I've lived here most of my adult life.
And what inspires the people that live in your complex and those areas? What brings you guys to a place that some would consider, I guess, a little more dangerous and unorthodox for the time being for Jews to live. I know that that is the correct place for Jews to live, but it doesn't exactly have the biggest Jewish community there just yet. Obviously, you're working on shifting that a little bit, but what brought you out there?
Well, I grew up in all four quarters of the old city, and I have a very strong spiritual attachment to the Temple Mount and everything that is around it. And it was natural, I think it's natural for a Jew, Drishas Tzion, we're supposed to be Doresh Tzion, Tzion is another name in the Torah for the Har Bayis, for the Makom Mikdash, and we're supposed to attach ourselves to it, we're supposed to be connected to it. So we feel very fortunate that we live in such a special place in such a special time, where we open our window in the morning and we're able to see a view of the Har Bayis right outside of our window. That's something that Jews have just dreamt about for thousands of years. So it's very special. Thank God.
I had the privilege of coming to your house for Shabbos one time, and it's the view out of your window is something spectacular. And like I told you,
it could be better. I always tell people it could be better, but we're working on that.
We can get rid of that giant golden dome. But like I said, I mean, coming out to where you live was really life-changing for me. It really opened my eyes to a lot of things, which is, I think it was a big part of the inspiration I had to move out to where I am now and try to help start a yeshuv here. Yeah. You gave me a little tour of Yerushalayim, of the old city, the part of the old city that a lot of Jews don't get to see.
The real part of the old city.
The real parts of the old city.
Yeah. I just say that because most people are not aware, and many Jewish tours concentrate in what they call the Jewish Quarter, and in reality, that quarter is relatively modern because it was basically razed to the ground by the Jordanians in 1948, and it was completely rebuilt in the past decades. All the streets have modern names, with the exception of one, Rehov HaYehudim. It's a few hundred years old, and but if you really want to experience what the old city looked like centuries ago, then you need to wander into the other quarters. So that's where I grew up, and that's where most of my tours center around, because I think that's the real old city.
And if you'd like to wander into those areas, join Josh Wander. You set me up there. I know you did. But you are a tour guide, and if anyone wants, they should reach out to you.
I always tell people I'm not a licensed tour guide, so I'm not licensed to make up stories. But I do, with all due respect to all my friends.
Although I have quite a few friends who are tour guides, I think that I would recommend you to be the first. Anyone who's coming to Eretz Yisrael, or anyone who lives in Eretz Yisrael, I would definitely recommend that they reach out to you to get a tour of the old city, which belongs to us, and the parts of the old city that probably a lot of other tour guides are not comfortable bringing their tourists to. So I would definitely recommend that everyone.
Many tour guides come to me because I am considered one of the resident experts of the area. It's not only the old city; it's what's around the old city. So you have Har Zeisim on one side, and you have Ir David down below, and you have Kfar Teimanim and Shimon HaTzadik, and all these different people. What's happening over the years is that a lot of people that grew up in the old city, in the walled city, so the prices have become outrageous to purchase there. And a lot, especially if you grew up there, so the children and grandchildren of families that grew up there just can't afford to buy houses, especially if you're a newlywed couple. So what they've been doing over the past decades is expanding the periphery of the old city, and communities have been popping up all around the old city. And that's part of what we're involved with. That leads to the second reason that we live where we live, which is that we feel a very strong necessity to reattach ourselves, capture, conquer, you can use lots of different words, lands that are not in our hands currently. And therefore, we found it natural. Where would it be more natural for a Jew to be than to be overlooking the Makom HaMikdash?
Yeah. I've been saying recently, people ask, why did I move to Judea? And I say, there's no more natural place for a Jew to live than in Judea. Right. But whenever I say that, although I say it because it sounds good and it's almost true, the only truth more than that is where you live is actually a little more natural than Judea.
True.
Although Judea is
everybody has. I have this theory. It's just a speculation of mine that everybody's neshama is connected to. We don't know exactly which tribes, different shvatim that we came from, but I think that everybody's neshama is connected to certain places in Eretz Yisrael. So there are some people that feel very comfortable living, let's say, in the desert. I can never imagine living in a desert. There are people that feel very comfortable want to be next to the sea, and there are other people that want to be up in the snow-capped mountains of the Hermon. And depending on what your neshama connects to, everybody has their place to be. So our place, we feel very comfortable where we are in Yerushalayim.
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of things to talk about. But there were a few things we've discussed in the past that I wanted to talk about. We never really had good discussions on because I was kind of saving it for the podcast. So the first of those things, I'd like to talk about the Israeli flag and what it represents. I'm not going to get into.
Can we put out a trigger warning now? Because anybody who has aversion to this should close their eyes. Okay, here we go. This is the Israeli flag. So just the. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to trigger everyone. But you can open your eyes now, all those Jews and Golus.
Yeah. So the reason this is important, and I think some people will understand why I just asked that question, and others might not understand. But like, for example, I never display an Israeli flag behind me in my podcast. I have maybe in some of my videos, but I understand that there's this weird allergic reaction that Jews have to the Israeli flag and like things like the word Zion. I don't know why.
Zionist,
right? It's like words straight from the Torah are now tainted because other people decided to use them. I don't know. And so I myself am struggling with how to look at the Israeli flag. Do I look at it as something that is a representation of people who were involved in Eretz Yisrael but didn't represent the Torah in a certain sense? Do I look at the Israeli flag as a representation of, no, it's Hashem put it sort of in the world as, this is the flag that divinely ordained should be the flag of the Jewish people. I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying, but these are all things that kind of go around in my head. So I'd love for you to explain a little bit about what the Israeli flag is and what you think it represents and how maybe Jews should look at this flag.
So one of the things I've found over many years of discussing issues such as this with Jews that are from the exile, that live in the diaspora, there are certain trigger phrases and words and symbols that people just, like you said, they're sort of allergic to it. And it's not because they have a deep understanding into where this comes from. It's just that's sort of how they've been raised. And I think I was raised in a similar sort of environment where I grew up in the yeshiva world in America. And there were certain things that we just either avoided or we sort of subliminally were taught that this is something that's negative and we should shy away from it. I try not to shy away from things, and I think we have to be very open, especially in this generation of any generation, to what is going on with the Geula unfolding. Divinely ordained is I'm not sure I would use that term, but everything is divinely ordained. I mean, there is besides our Bechira Chavshis, not besides Bechira Chavshis is huge, but many things are divinely ordained. The whole process which we are living in and experiencing now, which some people refer to as natural or this is normal. There are two things which really irk me. I'm sorry to get off the subject a little bit here. Two things that really irk me, especially with what's going on in current events. One is that whenever there's by the way, Israel is the only place where you can declare a war in the middle of a war. So we just finished the second war in the middle of a war. But when things get back to so-called normal, whether it be Corona or war or all these things that are going on around us, people are happy to go back to normal. And I think that's horrible. I think that's the last thing I want to do is get back to normal. I think normal is the problem that we're in, that we psychologically we feel very comfortable being in the normal, to have this baseline that we're in. But the Rebbeinu Shalom is sending us messages. The Rambam says very clearly in Hilchos Tainus that one that when bad things happen, we have to be introspective, and we have to try to understand why these things are happening. And just to ignore them drives me crazy when people talk about the Holocaust and they say, we can't understand the Holocaust. We just have to put that aside and ignore it. How could you? That was a huge message, whatever the message is. I'm not going to get into that's a whole podcast in itself, I'm sure, about the Holocaust. Whatever that message was a huge message. For us to put that aside, in the words of the Rambam, is achzari, is cruel. The Rebbeinu Shem sends us messages. Bad things happen in the world. And if we ignore those bad things, then he has to send stronger and bigger messages, bigger things that happen in order for us to wake up. And if we're not waking up and we're just going back to normal, then we're really missing the point. So over the period of the past couple years, Hashem has sent some of the biggest messages that our people have seen in generations, perhaps ever. And many Jews around the world are still going back to reverting back to, back to normal. Okay, now we can go back and live our normal lives in the 5 towns and go to eat burgers and do whatever we do for our life. It's like we're back to normal now. Okay, there was a time we couldn't get into Eretz Yisrael because the skies were closed, Corona, whatever the story, or the war. But now we're back to normal. We can hop on a flight and we can go back to Israel. So we can go visit like we do Cancun and all other vacation spots around the world. Okay, so we're back to normal. One of the amazing things, by the way, during Corona was, and I think a very strong message, was that if you notice during Corona, the skies were closed. You couldn't get into Israel as a tourist. But if you came on Aliyah, if you were willing to commit, then you were able to come into Israel. And this, I think, was a clear message. To me, it was a clear message. The Rebbeinu Shalom does not want Jews to come here as tourists. Right? This is not another Cancun. This is not another tourist attraction. This is not Disneyland. If you come here and you want to commit to living here, and you come on Aliyah, you're welcome to come in. If you're coming as a tourist, you're not so welcome to come in. And we see even those messages are getting stronger and stronger, like we just mentioned. What's happening in the past couple weeks is when the war started, the war within the war in Iran, and it started, and all the skies were closed, not only to tourists and not only to Olim, but also to Israelis. There were 200,000 Israelis that were stuck abroad. And again, what irks me to no end is when people say that there were 65,000 tourists that were here that were stuck in Israel, Jews that were stuck in Israel. I don't know how you could be a Jew stuck at home, but listen, if you're stuck outside of the American Dream Mall in the Disneyland, how can you survive? It's very interesting because we live in a generation in which the miracles are happening. I spoke in a number of yeshivas and seminaries that were stuck here because of the war. And I told them over from one of my mentors, Rav Nachman Kahana. I had the fortune of davening with him for over 30 years in what we call the Young Israel, the Muslim Quarter in the Old City. Chazon Yechezkel. So he told us that he made Aliyah from New York in 1962. And he described the way it was prior to the Six-Day War in 1967. He said it was a very, very scary time here in Eretz Yisrael. They were talking about the potential of a second Holocaust. They were digging thousands of graves preparing for the onslaught of the Arab armies on this fledgling state. And he said that many people that had a second passport, they were lining up in the airport to escape. I witnessed the same exact thing happen in 1991 during the first Gulf War. Even though all the rabbis from the Lubavitcher Rebbe to Rav Shach told American yeshiva boys they should stay in yeshiva, they shouldn't leave, they were literally lining up in the airport to escape. So Rav Nachman said, what was their punishment that they abandoned Eretz Yisrael in her time of need? And his answer was their punishment was that they weren't here to see the Nisim. Right? If you were here, you were living here, you literally watched day after day as the miracles unfolded right before your eyes. You were a part of this process. You were fortunate enough to bear witness. Those that left, so they got to hear it on the news. Okay, they turned on the news. They got to hear there were miracles happening in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, but being here and witnessing that is a schus that we're here during this very special time. So if there were yeshiva boys or seminary girls that were quote stuck here in Eretz Yisrael during the war, they should realize what an amazing miracles they're witnessing. We've become so desensitized to these miracles where we think it's again normal, whatever that means. I was on every Shabbos. I daven Shabbos day. I told you where Shabbos. So evening I daven Shabbos day. I daven in the Churva in the Old City. So I walk in, and afterwards we have a kiddush. It's on one of the rooftops of a house in the Old City. And several months ago, we're sitting, the whole kiddush, sitting on this rooftop. And as we're sitting without any sirens, a rocket comes above us and literally explodes right above the kiddush. What was the reaction of the people at the kiddush? So they all looked up, big boom. They all started clapping, and they continued eating. It happens to be that Shabbos, I had a guest from the 5 towns, someone who's involved in security in the shul that he attends in the 5 towns. And I turned to him and I said, what would be the reaction in your community if you were having this outdoor event and all of a sudden this rocket exploded right above it? What would be the reaction in your community? He said, what are you talking about? Are you crazy, Josh? He says there would be pandemonium. There would be... People would be hysterical. They would be running, crying, screaming. You can't even imagine what would happen. I said, look at the difference. I said, here we're so used to these miracles that when a rocket explodes above us, so we all start clapping. We enjoy the fireworks, and we continue on like nothing happened. Right? Like we're so desensitized to what's happening around us. But these are literally miracles that are happening daily here, and we're like. You can't even imagine just a year ago talking about ballistic missiles from Iran, being shot at. Like, what are you crazy? That'd be the end of the world. World War III. We're living literally with this happening, and we become this as another missile. You had one here last night. Another missile came overhead. Okay, we're so used to it. Baruch Hashem. Hashem has given us these iron domes and
like we were just saying before last night. You asked me if I heard the missile. I'm sleeping. All of a sudden, I hear boom. My house shakes. I wake up. Make sure my kids are still sleeping. My wife was like, "We're both up. It's 3 a.m. She's like, "What was that?" I'm like, "Oh, it's a missile." She's like, "Oh." We both turned over, went back to sleep. And like you just said, it's not. People are like, "Oh, you're used to missiles." We're not used to missiles. We're used to miracles.
That's right.
Continue.
That's exactly right. Stuff. We're used to the miracles, and Baruch Hashem, we're living in a time and a place where we can get used to miracles. Although we're not supposed to get used to, it's not supposed to be the normal. There's absolutely nothing normal about the days that we're living in, but we're in a very special place, and we're very, the fact that we have a special hashgacha here in Eretz Yisrael that you don't have anywhere else. People often ask about the dangers where I live. I think it's much more dangerous to live in Brooklyn than it is to live in where I live. Statistically speaking, there's more violent crime in every major city in America than there is anywhere in Eretz Yisrael. But just to be able to live in the midst of this hashgacha, that Mereishis Hashana, Achris Hashana, that their Rebbeinu Shalom is constantly looking at Eretz Yisrael and watching everything that happens. There's nothing that happens here is by happenstance. Everything is happening with a special hashgacha. There is a medrash that says La'asad Lavai that Eretz Yisrael is going to be like a huge hurricane. And people that are looking from the outside, they're going to see this and they're going to say, that is the most dangerous place. People are going to be crazy to go over there. But the people that are living inside the hurricane, in the eye of the storm, is going to be completely calm. And I've seen this over and over again throughout the years. I did during the first Gulf War. I remember I was actually stuck in America when the war broke out. I think it was Thursday night. The first Scud hit in Eretz Yisrael, and I was watching CNN, whatever it was, and it looked like that this is the end, right? Eretz Yisrael is going to be destroyed. And I got the first flight out. I left on Motzei Shabbos. I came here, and people, some people were carrying gas masks, some people whatever. It was completely calm. Like there was not like what we saw in America. The view of what we saw in America and what we saw here was completely different. People here are very relaxed and calm in general, and we're Baruch Hashem. We rely on their Rebbeinu Shalom to take care of us.
And I think you may have forgotten the original question. We're talking about the Israeli flag. Let's get back to that.
Back to the Israeli flag.
Tell us a little. The Israeli flag. Also, like I mentioned before, I would love to hear, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear the origin of the Magen David.
So the origin of the Magen David is a little bit controversial. It's not necessarily a Jewish symbol originally, meaning it goes back, predates, and it definitely is not from David HaMelech.
Right. It has no connection with him.
But it is become a symbol that is recognized. Lahavdil elef havdalos. When people look at a swastika today, they think that Nazi Germany.
Right.
The swastika was thousands of years before Germany, right? This was a symbol that was used in many cultures in the Far East and elsewhere. But it's become recognized today as being the symbol of...
And it was actually a symbol of peace.
Yeah.
The swastika was the symbol of like yin and yang. Yeah, that's what it was. And then it became the most horrific. It's like a symbol now that means genocide and death.
So today, the Magen David is recognized as a symbol of Eretz Yisrael, whether you like it or not. That's what it is. So now, what's interesting about the flag? I'll say a few things. Interesting to note, by the way, that in every Yom Ha'atzmaut, that is Israeli Independence Day, a Israeli flag is raised onto the pole on top of the Ponevezher Yeshiva.
Right.
Ponevezher Yeshiva is not a Zionist yeshiva. There's a whole history to that. But there are many people that recognize and have Hakaras Tov, just like the many American Jews are fond of saying how they have Hakaras Tov to the land of America that has given them the freedom of worship, and until the recent election in New York, and
that's just a typical thing that you notice pretty quickly, that all the rules in the Torah, Hakaras Tov, and recognition of everything that's Torahic is and halacha, all things apply across the board except when it comes to Eretz Yisrael. When it comes to Eretz Yisrael, there's no Hakaras Tov. Even if the people that started this land weren't good people, whatever it is, there is no Hakaras Tov when it comes to Eretz Yisrael. There is no recognition of the extreme divinity of everything that's taking place. The halachos of living in Eretz Yisrael. All of a sudden, it's like, there are some who say it's not a mitzvah deraisa, so we don't even need to live there. Like, anyway, I'm not going to go on a rant, but it's amazing. All the rules of Judaism don't apply to Eretz Yisrael. But continue.
There is a position of Rav Soloveitchik that the flag is actually holy in itself, intrinsically holy. He brings the halacha of someone who is killed, al kiddush Hashem, so they don't put tachrichim on this person before they're buried. They bury them with the clothes that they were murdered in, with the blood-stained clothes. And the idea is that they're meant to go to Shemayim, and that it's going to be a sign to Hashem that he should have rachamim on his people. He says that the flag today represents much more than just any other flag in the world. It's not just a symbol of the nation. The flag, or like the tachrichim, are these clothes that thousands, tens of thousands of holy Jews have given their ultimate sacrifice, their lives, for this country. And its blood-soaked flag, it has the kedusha of the clothes that a person that dies al kiddush Hashem. So it's different than any other flag in the world, that it has this. It's imbibed with this special kedusha to it. Regardless, like we were saying, there are a lot of terms that are trigger terms that are misunderstood, and I don't blame it on people, because there is a very serious lack of education, especially outside of Eretz Yisrael, when it comes to certain ideas. I have many, this again, another podcast, but there's a lot to discuss as to why, how this evolved this way, and whether it's done intentional or unintentionally. But clearly, when it comes to ideas of Mashiach, of Golus and Geula, of the state of Israel, there are a lot of things that are pushed aside, ignored, not spoken about negatively, and there's a lot of these terms. And I think it's a lot of just misunderstanding of what these things are. When we speak about a Zionist, so to me, all Jews are Zionists. By definition, you have to be a Zionist, because Zionism is not something that Herzl started. That is the modern secular Zionism. But all we have today in Eretz Yisrael dates back 100 years before Herzl was even born. We had the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon both attempted themselves to come on Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, unsuccessfully, and they both of them sent their Talmidim here, and they the ones that really started modern day Zionism, the living in Eretz Yisrael, and then on the back of that, there was this secular socialist movement that came along and took over this term. The Chavetz Chaim attempted 4 times to make Aliyah. On his third attempt, he had a boat ticket to come to Eretz Yisrael, and he had a house that they built for him in Petach Tikva, and he was about to leave on his boat, and right before he was to travel, Reb Chaim Ozer came to him and told him that if he leaves, then he's going to destroy European Jewry, because the Jews in Europe cannot survive without him, and convinced him to stay. On his fourth attempt, he didn't want any rabbis to come and convince him not to leave, so he kept it a secret that nobody should know about. Unfortunately, his daughter, from a second marriage, Fegechaya, she became very sick. She contracted tuberculosis, and he had to take care of her and stayed behind.
Was his daughter? I thought it was his wife who got sick.
His daughter. His daughter got sick. His daughter was married to the Zaxes. That's the famous Zax, or Mendel Zax was the son-in-law of the Chofetz Chaim. So it was his daughter, and he passed away in 33 in Radin. There, throughout the generations, anyone that had the potential of moving to Eretz Yisrael would move to Eretz Yisrael. Of course, how would you think? Even if it entailed, and it did entail often, the extreme sacrifice, both financial sacrifice, lowering of standards. I'm not talking about from 5-town standards to Yerushalayim, from bingo to Osher Ad. I'm talking about serious lowering of standards, where there were sons of Rav Aryeh Levin that died of starvation in the streets of Yerushalayim. People really sacrificed to live here. The travel to get here was a sacrifice. The Tosfos mentions it in Ksubas. Maybe that's a reason that we don't have to move to Eretz Yisrael in the days of the Tosfos 1,000 years ago, because sakonas derachim. If you took a ship, you got onto a boat to come to Eretz Yisrael, there's a 50-50 chance you'll make it. You might live, you might die. Right? Imagine you're coming on Aliyah, you're going on an El Al flight. We give you a 50-50 chance of you surviving the flight. That would not be most people wouldn't take that deal. People still sacrificed for thousands of years to come to Eretz Yisrael. That was the norm. The norm was that all Jews wanted to come, and of course we daven 3 times a day to Yerushalayim, and we all we speak constantly in all of our tefillos about coming back to Eretz Yisrael. And the norm was that anybody who had the potential of coming to Eretz Yisrael would come to Eretz Yisrael. That, to me, is the definition of Zionism. That Zionism is the movement to move that Jews should move back to their homeland. Now, again, because the secular socialists at one point decided to take over this term and to make it into something else, that doesn't take away the chashivas of this term. The idea that the Jews are supposed to come back to Israel is not something that secular socialists came up with. I always tell people, if I were a Jew living in Europe 100 years ago, I probably would have been the biggest anti-Zionist. What do I mean by anti-Zionist? I would have been against the idea of replacing Torah Judaism with secular Zionism, secular socialism. But that's not what Zionism means to me. Just like when you speak about Golus and Geula, right? When people say, I'm sure you've heard the same thing all the time. I hear it. You're also in Golus. We're in Lakewood. We're in Golus. You're also in Golus. You're in Yerushalayim in Golus. What's the difference? We're all in Golus. I disagree strongly with that idea. To me, Golus, again, we have to define our terms. Golus means a geographic location. If you're in a place where you're supposed to be, you're not in Golus. If you're in a place that you've been exiled, you've been sent out of where you're supposed to be, then you're in Golus.
Right, people made it that if you don't have the Beis Hamikdash, you're in Golus.
I would agree. Shechina begalusa. The Shechina is in Golus. Why? Because the Shechina is not totally where it's supposed to be. So I would agree it's in Golus, but to say that a Jew living in Yerushalayim or Kodesh is in Golus, not that's where they're supposed to be. That's not Golus.
The way I answer it is like I don't fight about it too much. I just say yes, we're both in Golus, except the difference is I'm 1.5 feet out of it, and you're still deep down in the center of it. And so I'm like whatever. Basically, I'm almost out of it. If you want to consider me still in Golus because there's no Beis Hamikdash, fine, we can agree on that. But I think we can agree that if Golus is a time period, which I think it is, right? Everyone knows that there's a start to Golus and an end to Golus. We're at the end of it, and a lot of other Jews, they are very happy being still in the center of it.
So there was a Rav here in Bnei Brak. Some of your listeners might have heard of him. His name was the Chazon Ish. He was not considered a Zionist. He didn't wave an Israeli flag. But once Hakamas HaMedina happened in 1948, he stated, it's written in the books, he stated that this is the end of the Golus. Right? We're no longer under the Ottoman Turks. We're no longer under the British. Jews are free to come here at will to Eretz Yisrael.
And he urged people
that
to
is
live
the
here.
end of Golus. He says, but he added to that, but we have not yet gotten to Geula. We're somewhere in limbo between Golus and Geula.
Yeah, exactly.
I would agree with that totally, but I would add to that was said 80 years ago.
Right.
And a lot has happened in the past 80 years. So we're definitely much, much closer to the Geula, if not deep in the Geula, than we were 80 years ago. But clearly we're not in Golus. The Golus is something that... now, there is a famous Torah that's said over. Some people say it in the name of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. Some people say in the name of Rav Kook. Depends on where you're coming from. But we daven on every musaf, and we say, Mipnei chata'enu galinu ma'aretzeinu. That because of our sins, we were sent into exile. So the Rav said that clearly that is that we have to atone for our sins because we were sent into exile. But that's not nearly as bad as the second half, which is v'nisrachaknu ma'alad moseinu. That even when we had the opportunity to come back to Eretz Yisrael, right? It's one thing to be forced into Golus, but even when we had the opportunity to come back, we still distanced ourselves from Eretz Yisrael. We had the opportunity. Once we were given, if you're forced into exile, okay, Nebuch, you're forced into exile. But once you're able to be given the opportunity to come back and you still choose to remain in exile, that's a much more serious problem.
Right. And this is something I talk a lot about. And I guess the Israeli flag falls into a similar category. We talk a lot about Tanakh, and after, I guess, the Reformed movement and the Christians, they made Tanakh the center of their learning. The Reformed, they kind of got rid of Torah Shebal Peh and just stuck to Torah Shebiksav, which
and they were anti-Zionist.
and
because that's why they call where their places of worship temples and not shuls, because they said the original Reform said that we don't need to have a base of Mikdash in Yerushalayim. We can have a temple in New York. We can have it in Berlin. We don't need to have. So our temples are here. We don't need to be we don't need to be these crazy Zionists that want to move back to Eretz Yisrael. That was the origins of Reform. At some point, they realized that was not popular,
right,
and they became more Zionist. And now they've come full circle, and then most of them have gone back to being anti-Zionist for whatever reasons. But
they realize there's a lot of holiness there, and they like to stay away from anything holy. But with Tanakh, right, because the Reformed and the Haskalah and all these things, because they focused on Tanakh, so the mainstream Jews said, okay, we got a distance from it. And when we delete Tanakh from the Seder of learning in yeshivas and chedarim, you're left with what we're seeing now. Big problems. Jews who have no idea why we should be living in Eretz Yisrael. Jews who literally think it's a mitzvah to talk against Eretz Yisrael. I mean, the craziest stuff. That's what happens when you delete Torah Shebiksav from mainstream Judaism. Eretz Yisrael.
My Rebbe Rav Shechter always says that Chumash is also Torah. It's not only the Gemara. There's a joke that they say about this guy that walks into a Beis Medrash and he sees this book, this one right over here. He sees the book and he starts flipping through the pages. He's like, "Wow!" He's all wild by this book. He says, "This is incredible. Someone did this likut." And they took all these different passages that we find in Shas, and they put into this one book, and they called it Tanakh. It's amazing. They've never seen anything like it. There were actually rabbis, Hasidic rabbis, that said you shouldn't learn Tanakh because you'll become a Zionist. Because if you start learning the Tanakh, it's very obvious where this is all leading.
Yeah, so Tanakh, Eretz Yisrael, obviously, again, Herzl and Ben Gurion, they took Eretz Yisrael, the Zionists took Eretz Yisrael, the Reformed and the Christians took Tanakh, and the Israeli flag is lumped in there, and we have all these things. Well, I'm not going to say about the Israeli flag, but Tanakh and Eretz Yisrael, we're talking about the holiest parts, the most important parts, most significant parts of our entire religion, we just threw away because other sects that we don't agree with put a focus on them. And that's, I guess, the similar idea with the Israeli flag. The Israeli flag, wherever it's from and whatever it represents, the fact is, it is the flag of Israel. It is the flag that represents the Jewish people. That's what Hashem put in the world, whether you like it or not. But because there are people who we don't agree with, secular Jews, whoever it is, that are waving this flag, we have to distance ourselves from this.
It's become more clear since October 7th, since Simchas Torah, that the anti-Zionist movement is an anti-Semitic movement.
Yeah.
And many people that did never... Amazing things have happened with all the terrible things that happened on that Simchas Torah. The amazing amount of spiritual awakening that's happened since then is incredible.
Yeah.
You have thousands and thousands of people that decided to make Aliyah. Like only the same thing happened this past couple weeks ago. Only in Eretz Yisrael, when their war breaks out, a major war in a country, all of its citizens, 200,000 Israelis, are doing whatever it takes. They're coming through Egypt. They're going through Jordan. They're coming through boats from Cyprus. However they can come back to Eretz Yisrael. Most people, and normal people, right? There's a war breaks out. They stay in where it's safe. Why would they want to come back to the? We're in a different category.
There's no such a thing as an Israeli refugee. Right? Every Ukraine has refugees. Russia has refugees. Every Arab country has Israelis, when, like you said before, it's because we're not getting used to missiles. We're getting used to miracles. And Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael, they recognize that. And when missiles are flying and they just happen to have been in America for some trip for some reason, they're like, no, I don't want to miss the miracles. So they don't see missiles, they see miracles. And
my friend, former member of Knesset, Dov Lippman. So he told me that there was a course that it's given in North America every year by the Jewish Agency on the foundations of Zionism. And on an average year, they had between 100 and 150 attendees to this course. Since October 7th, they've had over 9,000 applications to this course. People that had no affiliation to their Jewish roots before this, all of a sudden woke up on October 7th and realized that as affiliated as or unaffiliated as they are with their Jewish roots, they're still going to be targeted as Jews. There was an article that I read right afterwards. I forgot who it was. The article was entitled, "Am I the Only One Who Doesn't Know This Secret?" And it was about a woman who works in one of the university campuses. And she said she had no connection to her Judaism. She didn't consider herself Jewish. She literally had nothing. She knew she was Jewish, but she had no connection. She woke up after October 7th, that's October 8th, whatever it was. She came back to the university, and she's walking through the halls, and she describes how people are looking at her, and they're pointing at her, and they're whispering. And she's like, what's going on here? Like, everybody else knows that I'm Jewish, but I don't know, am I the only one who doesn't know the secret that I don't know that I'm Jewish? And it's really created quite an amazing awakening around the world of Jews that realize that they're going to be targeted. And it gets back to what we're talking about. The Israeli flag represents, whether we like it or not, Medinas Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, and whether you want to separate it because of whatever hashkafa you have, the fact is that's the way the world looks at it. And just like there's no difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, there's no difference between, for 99.999% of the world, there's no difference between this flag and a person learning in yeshiva in Panovich or Lakewood, for that matter. It doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. This represents the Jewish people. It represents the destiny of the Jewish people. Whether we like it or not, that is what the world sees.
Yeah. But again, as long as everyone can keep, hating on Israeli flags, on the word Zionism, they can keep shaking off the responsibility of having to live here and of being part of the Geula and fulfilling their mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael. So that's really what it all is. Because when you have a conversation with anyone about whether it's the Israeli flag, whether it's Zionism, whether it's Tanakh, people are just fumbling on their words. They have no idea what to say or answer because they know it's ridiculous. But again, it's just because people are still just trying so hard to get out of that responsibility of making Aliyah, living in it. People, even the word Aliyah, by the way, has become such a controversial word. People reach out to me all the time from about my videos, and they say, you should stop using the word Aliyah. You should just say living in Eretz Yisrael, because some people look down at the word Aliyah. You can't satisfy anyone. Like, I'm sorry, if you hate on the word Aliyah, you hate on the word Tzion, I don't know who brought you up, but you got a lot to learn, my friend.
I was on a speaking tour in the West Coast several years ago, and something happened there. I was flying Air France, and there was a nationwide strike in France, so they I couldn't fly back. There was some reason that I got stuck there for an extra Shabbos. I didn't plan on it, but people quickly set me up to speak in a couple shuls that weren't planned. So I show up that Shabbos in this shul, and they introduced me and they asked me to get up get to speak on Shabbos morning. And as I'm walking up to the podium, the rabbi stops me and he whispers to me. He says, "I'm not sure exactly what you're going to speak about, but I want you to know that in our shul, we don't use the A word." I said, "Excuse me, Rabbi?" He said, "Aliyah. We don't use that word here. It's taboo, and we don't use that." Of course, that's all I spoke about. That was the reason I came. But I'm sure I'm not going to be invited back. But there are some people that have aversions to that also. The flip side is also happening at the same time as people are understanding the connection to Eretz Yisrael and to the flag in Medinas Yisrael and everything that's happened since Hakamas HaMedina. People also are awakening here, the people that are not yet religious, and especially after October 7th. It's amazing, after Simchas Torah, I've heard this from multiple soldiers, religious and secular, that are serving. I have 4 kids that are currently serving, and they're in Aza, and they say that they go into houses, and when they go into the houses, they see in every house a picture of the Har HaBayis, of the Moko Mikdash. They go into every school, they go into every government office, and they're always, what they're confronted with is a picture of the Moko Mikdash. In fact, the Arabs, our enemies, Hamas, called this whole war Al-Aqsa Floods. They called it after the Moko Mikdash. And a lot of people that are not religious, don't have a religious background, they're soldiers in the army, they feel there's something very off here. There's something wrong. How is it that our enemies have such a clear vision of what they're after, but we don't have that vision, right? We just don't know. And that's why they created this patch. Can you see the patch? I don't know if you can see the patch. Which is the most popular patch now in the IDF. Religious and secular people in Gaza are wearing this because they understand that the Beis HaMikdash should also, we need to also have vision. It's not enough that just our enemies have vision. We also need to have a vision of where we're headed to.
Yeah, even the Beis HaMikdash, it's just, I've never ceased to be amazed. I talk about the Beis HaMikdash with people. Even that's like a subject. Even tefillin. I think you wrote this somewhere on the internet recently. Someone approached you and said, "Why are you wearing that garment? Like, why are you wearing that old garment?"
Old times garments.
Yeah.
There's a guy with a Streimel and a Bekish, and he was telling me, "Why am I wearing these old day clothes?" There are people that misunderstand. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lack of education. That's what it comes down to. For whatever reason, over the past hundreds of years, we've moved away from learning Tanakh, like you said. We've moved away from learning certain sources and talking about certain subjects which have become taboo. And the truth is that for thousands of years, since the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, we went into exile. And that exile was more than just a physical exile. It was a spiritual exile. And we've lost the ability to connect to a lot of the mitzvahs in the Torah. Out of the Taryag mitzvos, almost a third of them only apply here in Eretz Yisrael. So if you're living in Lakewood or in Monsey, you're already missing a third of the Torah, which is just to think about that for a second. That's incredible. There are thousands of younger lights that are learning in BMG every day, satisfied and thinking they're at the peak. They've reached the ultimate. That they're learning in Kollel in BMG. And they're missing doing almost a third of the Torah. They're missing, like it's completely. It's something that they don't have access to.
And I've heard many such people say things like, "We have to do our best to fulfill every mitzvah in the Torah." Like they'll have a chance to do like Shluch HaKan, and they'll be like, "What's the big deal?" They're like, "No, an opportunity to do a mitzvah we never get to do. You have to run and do it." But what about Eretz Yisrael and like hundreds of mitzvahs? Get him out of the shul. Don't talk about that. That's just. Yeah.
So one of the things I often speak about when it comes to this, and by the way, this is why there are many rabbis that live abroad that are very uncomfortable with the idea of Eretz Yisrael, because there are many, for thousands of years, for hundreds of years, depending on what books you're relying on. Let's say the Shulchan Aruch. There have been 4 volumes of the Shulchan Aruch that more or less have become very natural when you're paskening halacha you open up your Shulchan Aruch, you open up your Mishnah Berurah or Shulchan, whatever it is, and you open up your Halacha Sefer, and you can open up the Tshuvas of the different Achronim, and you can find the answers to your questions. But these books, there is not a book in the Shulchan Aruch, there's not a book that you can open up, and all of a sudden you can see, what do we do when the Jewish people have come back to Eretz Yisrael in mass? We have a Jewish government, we have a Jewish army. Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon is the chief rabbi of Gush Etzion. So one of the first books he wrote was a couple volumes of books that were written halachas of a chayal, of a Jewish soldier in the IDF. And he always likes to say that people came to him and said, why don't you be like a normal rabbi? Like, write a book on tefillin, on tzitzis, on Shmir Shabbos. Like what is this? The halachas in the army. He says, what a schus that I have. For thousands of years, this was not something that was applicable. So nobody wrote books about it because it just wasn't something that was. Today we're living in a generation where these things are coming. It's real. It's halacha l'maisa. Yeah. And I can actually bring these halachas back. Now, for many rabbis, it's very uncomfortable. Like, you have to be able to pass in halachas, you have to not just open up a Mishnah Berurah, but you have to go back and learn the sugya from its source. You have to open up a Tanakh. You have to open up the Mishnayos and the Gemaras and go through all the different sources, the Rishonim, and you have to try to figure out what the Rambam is the exception to the rule, of course. The Rambam took all of Torah, Kol Torah Kula, and put it together. But it's very rare to see a sefer that encompasses all of the Torah, and it's something that people are lacking. There are many mitzvos in the Torah. I tell people that unfortunately we are not able to perform. There are ones that apply to specific people. There are mitzvahs that apply to a man, to a woman. There are mitzvahs that apply specifically to a Kohen, to a Levi. There are mitzvahs that only apply Bizman HaMikdash. And then there are mitzvahs that we prefer not to do. Right? There are mitzvahs in the Torah. For example, there's a mitzvah in the Torah to divorce your wife. We try not to divorce our wives, right? If one has to get divorced, then there's a mitzvah of Girushin, Yibun, Chalitza. There's lots of things that we prefer not to do these things, but if it happens, we have a mitzvah to deal with them. And then there are a whole bunch of mitzvahs that were just neglected. They were forgotten over 2,000 years of Golus. I always like to tell the story of someone who's buried on our mountain, Rav Yosef Rosenberger. So he realized just a couple generations ago in America that the mitzvah of shatnez was completely forgotten to the Jewish people. Like, people learned Shnai Mikra, so they knew there was such a mitzvah, but they didn't realize it was a practical mitzvah, something we can actually do. He opened the first shatnez laboratory in Williamsburg and went around the country in his entire life speaking about the mitzvah of shatnez and literally single-handedly revived this mitzvah to the Jewish people. Likewise, since the beginning of the war, I've attempted to revive a mitzvah in the Jewish people. I wrote the book on Chatzotros, and this is the mitzvah. I don't know if you want to hold it. The mitzvah of Chatzotros. So many people don't realize that it is a mitzvah midoraisa, that bizman milchama and b'shas be'ez tzara, when we're in a time of trouble, when we're in time when we go into war, there's a mitzvah in the Torah to blow 2 silver trumpets, minimum of 2 silver trumpets. And that mitzvah has just been forgotten. There's a theme throughout the sources of rabbis throughout the generations trying to figure out why is it that we're not practicing this mitzvah today? Because it seems like something we should be doing. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. And there are a lot of different reasons given. Some people, the Mishnah Berurah actually brings down that we should be performing this mitzvah today. And he says that perhaps the reason we're not performing it is because we're not in Eretz Yisrael. And he says, even if we were in Eretz Yisrael, we don't have a Jewish government. Today we don't have those excuses. Although when people say, "Oh, it's a Jewish government," it's not really a Jewish government, right? So I always explain to them, if clearly you don't know Tanakh,
right?
Because the vast majority of our kings, which we're still kings, were very bad. They were
and the
not
Torah
just bad.
refers to them as kings.
That's
it's
right.
not controversial.
That's
They're called
right.
Malachim.
That's right. We recognize them as kings, and they made, some of us made us worship Avodah Zarah in the streets.
They were significantly worse than Herzl and Ben Gurion.
Yes. And definitely Bibi Netanyahu.
Definitely.
We today are living, Baruch Hashem, in a country which is the biggest supporter of Torah probably ever since Bais Rishon. There are more than 300,000 Jews that are learning full-time Torah in Eretz Yisrael. It's never been seen anywhere, any time in the history of the Jewish people, what we see today. And there's being sponsored by the Israeli government. So this is not what happened with the evil kings, right? There was a lot worse.
I would assume anyone from like Lakewood probably didn't make it this far in the podcast, but those who have are watching you right now, and they're probably like, no, he's lying.
So
it's not
funny.
true. They're all dead.
So I'm right now in the midst of writing my second book, which is we thought to entitle...
The first one is on Chatzos.
Chatzos.
Here we are right here.
Right.
Let's just show also.
The second book has to do, I call it Practical Geula, a step-to-step guide to the redemption process. And I was actually speaking to a friend of mine who's a rabbi in Lakewood, and he said to me, Josh, how can we help out with this book? So I told him the truth is that I really don't need any haskamas from rabbis in Lakewood. But if you have connections there, I said, maybe you could do me a favor and you can get my book banned. I said, if you get it banned, everybody will want to buy it. Then I'm sure. So he says to me, Josh, he says, why don't you just call the book Banned in Lakewood? So we're debating now exactly what we're going to call it. But it definitely will have some what many people consider to be controversial subjects of what's happening today with the Geula and what that requires from Jews around the world to be doing.
Yeah. It's funny that the word controversial, so much about controversial. Geula is controversial. Beis Hamikdash is controversial. Wearing tefillin all day is controversial. The funny thing is, like, I make videos where I talk about Eretz Yisrael and moving to Eretz Yisrael, completely not from the Zionistic perspective. I talk about it as a mitzvah in the Torah, as a prerequisite to bring the Geula. Everything I quoted with Torah sources. It couldn't really. Nothing controversial about it. And in the beginning, things were going good. And then at one point, things got better because a friend of mine showed me, he showed me, actually I had a few friends of mine show me things already where they were, I have friends who post my videos on their WhatsApp statuses and people started commenting back like, oh, this guy's a controversial character. You shouldn't be posting his stuff. And so I had friends like sharing with me, these message exchanges, that I'm a controversial character. And I lit up because I'm like, oh, I know I'm finally recognized as speaking the truth because now I'm controversial. If you're not,
and the masses will start listening to you because unfortunately, when you're controversial and then everybody wants to read it, the making of a gadol, the book that was banned, and then all of a sudden everybody is sold out. So that's
exactly. And I mean, I'd love for anyone to show me anything I've ever said that's controversial, but I am happy that I am controversial because, like we just said, everything holy is controversial. Moshiach is controversial.
I'm not controversial. But
you've just already been banned everywhere.
No, again, it's just a matter. To me, it's tinokesh nishbu'u. There are many Jews around the world. It doesn't matter if they grew up in a secular home or if they're learning in Lakewood, that are just ignorant of basic concepts in the Torah, and it sounds crazy for many people to hear that there are rabbis in America that just don't know basic things when it comes to Eretz Yisrael and different halachas that apply. That again, there are just things I could tell you I'll give you an anecdote with the chatzotros. So I went around with the chatzotros to many of the gedolim here in Eretz Yisrael. So Haredi, the national religious, Sephardi, Ashkenazi, Hasidish, all different rabbis from all different walks of life. And many of them that were honest, they said to me, Josh, they said, we're not familiar with this sugya. This is not something we ever learned. Come and teach us, which is an amazing thing today, that a pashat person like a Yosef Rosenberger or a Josh Wander is able to come and teach the Gedolei Yisrael about sugyas which they unfortunately never touched. So there are things that are coming back to the world because eventually it'll all come back. And the land will be covered. The Rebbeinu Shalom is going to bring back all of this knowledge back to the world, and even when it's uncomfortable and what many people consider to be controversial, all that means is that they're not familiar with it, so they have to learn the sugyas. Right? When you talk about tefillin, right? If you don't understand, people, how could you wear tefillin? What does that mean? Right now, am I doing something mundane because I'm sitting with Michal here in a studio and talking about these holy subjects? This is not mundane. This is living in Eretz Yisrael and doing what many people may consider mundane is not mundane at all. This is part of the holiness that we have here in Eretz Yisrael, that we could sit and have this conversation and try to educate people. And that's not mundane. That's something that Jews are supposed to be doing. Of course, if I'm going to eat lunch, I'm going to take them off, right? But there are thousands of Jews today that wear tefillin all day. And they wear it from Gil Chinuch. They from 9 years old, they're already wearing tefillin all day. And that's something normal. And there are many mitzvahs, tcheles, that we can go into, many mitzvahs that are brought that people just are not aware of. And that's part of what my book discusses, is the process which has led us from, actually tcheles is one of the first one where the Redziner Rebbe understood that this was a necessary step for the Geula, for us to find tcheles. And he went through his whole process of finding his tcheles, which we don't use today. But it was part of that understanding that the Geula, the Gra says on the Megillas Esther, this might be a little bit controversial, says on the Megillas Esther that there are two queens. One was Vashti and one was Esther. And he says that these two queens represent Klal Yisrael. So people look at me sometimes when I say, I can understand how Esther Malka represents Klal Yisrael, but Vashti, what does she have to do with Klal Yisrael? So it's explained that there are two segments of the Jewish population. There are those Jews that are more like Vashti. Right? Vashti was a passive queen. She sat back. She was invited to the party. She sat back. She didn't want to lift a finger. She's not interested in doing anything. And then there are the Jews that are more like Esther Malka, that are proactive, and they understand we have to do things in order to get things done. There are steps that need to be taken for the Geula. So there are Jews that are like Vashti. They sit in wherever they sit, and they sit back and they say, we're waiting for Mashiach. Right? We don't have to actually do anything. We're just going to sit back and wait for Mashiach. And then there are the Esther Malka Jews that understand we have to be proactive. There are concrete steps that need to be taken to prompt the Geula. It's not something we're just supposed to sit back and wait for. So today we have these two groups. We have these groups of Jews that think we're just supposed to sit back and wait for Mashiach, and those that understand that there are tangible, concrete actions that need to be taken.
Even with Esther, Mordechai told her, right, when she didn't want to go into King Ahasuerus, he said, either go, and if you don't, the salvation is going to come somewhere else. And then, so even with Esther, I mean, that's what you could tell the Jewish people. That's what I thought, no one can force you to move to Eretz Yisrael. No one can force you to be part of the Geula, but it's coming whether you like it or not. It's a chaval for you to be alive in this generation, see the miracles we're seeing, and not want to be part of that. It's just it's really sad. And again, like I always say, I think that it really stems from getting rid of Tanakh, making Eretz Yisrael some sort of sin or controversial thing where people can't even accept that it's a mitzvah in the Torah. So there's a lot of issues.
The second part of the book, by the way, is bringing together all the different projects that are happening today in Eretz Yisrael and around the world that are Geula related.
Oh,
and how these things are. It's amazing. There are dozens and dozens of these different projects. You spoke about one on one of your podcasts recently with the stones of the base of Mikdash. Yeah. Actually, I spoke to him about a year ago. You know about this?
Zev?
Yes.
No idea.
And I told them, I have pictures of this stone, like you posted. Go see the podcast. I said, but I checked with El Al. I go on these speaking tours around the world, and I checked with El Al, and these stones weigh a couple tons each, and they're above my baggage allowance. So the El Al didn't want me to take these on the plane. So I said, what am I going to do? I could show pictures of the stones, but it's different to have something tangible in your hands that you can feel than it is to just show a picture of something. So I said, can you do me a favor? The same stone that you're quarrying the stones to build the base of Mikdash, build me a Kiddush cup. Right? Make me a Kiddush cup that I could take with me. I could travel Kiddush cup, and I could take it with me. And I could show them, this is that same stone that they're quarrying to build the base of Mikdash. This is this Kiddush cup. So he made me this beautiful Kiddush cup, which is a little bit heavy. It's made out of solid stone, and this stone actually gives me an opportunity also to teach people about the dinim of Tumah and Tahara. This is where clay Evan is what was used by the Kohanim, because it's not Makabel Tumah. So it's something that's used, you see throughout the archaeological excavations today. That's in houses of Kohanim. This is what they used. But it gives me an opportunity so people can feel that there's something real. I'll just give you some quick other examples that I brought with me here. You have a group of women here in Eretz Yisrael that they've made it their life mission to first of all, they've taken the three dyes that are mentioned in the Torah, that are Tcheles, Argamon, and Toilah Shani. And we've brought these together, and they actually weave this for the Big Day Kahuna, for the Paroches, for different things in the Beis Mikdash. And this is actually an example. This is the three different dyes of the Tcheles, Argamon, and Toilah Shani. It reminds me that I was once giving a tour to two women that taught Nach from Lakewood. And they hired me for an hour, and they wound up spending 8 hours with me. And they couldn't believe that everything that they teach in Tanakh, right? Everything they teach, you could see it right in front of your eyes. Like it's actually happening here. It's not something that's just theoretical. It's something that's real that's happening here. It's amazing. This over here, this is the chilazon.
Ooh, wow.
Right? The chilazon, which we have make our tcheles with
nice.
today.
This is the shell of
according to the position of Herzog, and that's the Murex trunculus. Likewise, we have, this is pottery. This is part of my show and tell kit that I take with me. So in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, there was a whole industry revolving around the Ole Haregel. There were millions of Jews that would come 3 times a year as required to Yerushalayim. And you can imagine that they're coming, many of them, great distances. It would take them weeks and months to get here. And they would be carrying with them a backpack. You know, what could you carry with them? So what would they have in their backpack? They'd probably have some extra water, some extra food, an extra pair of underwear, whatever it is. What they did not have was their kitchen sink, right? You couldn't carry your pots and pans with you because you're not going to schlep that for thousands of hours. So when they got to Yerushalayim and they had to bring karbanos in the Beis Hamikdash, they were forced to buy what we call in Eretz Yisrael chad pa'ami, disposable ware, right? What was the disposable ware of the times of Beis Mikdash? Klei cheres, right? They made this cheap pottery, and that way you can bring your korban, you can cook it in your klei cheres in your pot, and then what would happen is there's an is in the Torah called nosar, that when you bring a korban, just like in kashrus, you have a vessel. So when you cook something that's milchig, fleishig, whatever it is, treif, whatever it is, and it gets soaked. It's balua inside of the walls of that pot. And then if you reuse that pot, what was soaked into the walls gets back into the food, and that affects the status of the food. So likewise, when you cook a korban inside of a kli, that vessel now is soaked with the korban. And if you were to reuse this the next day, you would be eating nosar, which is a chiv kares. So in order to avoid this, we know what they did was they would take their pots after they would use them, and they would smash them down on the ground, breaking them into many millions of pieces, and that way they couldn't be reused. By the way, this is how we know in Mishkan Shiloh, one of the reasons they speculate where Mishkan Shiloh was, because we found thousands and thousands of broken pots. There's actually a whole science to know whether this thing was just dropped or was actually purposely, intentionally broken. These were intentionally broken, and we know that why it was intentionally broken is in order to destroy them so they wouldn't be reused. So this is actually a piece from the Har HaBayis. It was excavated. I can't speak about how I got it, but whatever it is a piece of klei cheres that was used in the times we know from Bayis Sheni, from the way the design, and this has a korban inside of it, right? So don't eat this; you'll be chayv kares. But imagine that today we're able to touch something, to feel something, to hold something that has a korban from the Beis Hamikdash in it. Right? It's amazing. It's mind blowing that we're able to do these things, and this is part of bringing the Torah back to life is what it's all about. Right? When you're living in Golus, the Torah, with all due respect, is dead. Yeah, it's something. I had the fortune of studying under a former.
Sushi is in though. Sushi's good. Torah's a little old fashioned. Carbonas, I don't know, man. Carbonas don't appeal to me.
I had the fortune of studying under a former Supreme Court Justice, Antonin Scalia, Zichrono Livracha. Very special person. And he used to always say that he much prefers a dead constitution to a living constitution. I don't know if I'm not going to go into this, but there's this idea where the constitution is like a living document, and therefore you have these activist judges that are able to decide whatever it means. And he was very into what's called originalism. He believed that you had to know when the Constitution of the United States was written, what did it mean, these words back then? He used to collect old dictionaries from 250 years ago to understand when the founding fathers of America wrote these words, what did the word mean to them? Not what does it mean today. It could mean something completely different today. What did it mean back then? And then you can understand that, what the meaning of it is. And now there's a process of legislation if somebody wants to change that, but that's not something that a judge is supposed to do. But bringing the Torah back to life, right? Bringing it back to life where it's not just something that's written in a book that we study because we have to. It's something that's alive, it's it's real, it's something that we see. And if you live here in Eretz Yisrael, you see it wherever you go, whenever you go. You see it just living. You see it living in the land. You see it living in the Jews that live here. Wherever you go, you see the Torah coming alive. And it's something that, unfortunately, that's one of the punishments of Golus, is that it's going to become a dead document. It's something that's studied black on white, just theory, and there's no life to it. There's no chiyas to it. And the chiyas comes from living in Eretz Yisrael. And that's, by the way, one of the definitions of chiyas hamesim. It's amazing. The Gra says that when the Churban Beis Hamikdash happened, that was the death of the Jewish body, the national body of the Jewish people. And then we were sent into Golus. And that Golus was the Kvura. The Jewish people were buried. Our nation was buried. And the 2,000 years that we were in exile, that was the body of the Jewish people decomposing. Now, the process of the Jewish people reviving itself and coming back to Eretz Yisrael is the process of Tchias HaMesim. Right? Tchias HaMesim is not only literally is written that the dead people are going to come out of the ground, but it's also the Jewish nation coming alive again. Right? After we've gone and we've been buried and decomposed in Golus over 1,000 years, the process of bringing us back to Eretz Yisrael and becoming a living nation again, that is the process of Tchias HaMesim. And we're watching it happen. We're Hashem, the people that are here, we're literally watching it happen. If you spoke to somebody a mere 80 years ago and you told them that soon there's going to be a kibbutz Golus with millions of Jews back in Eretz Yisrael, there's going to be a Binyan Yerushalayim, a bustling city of over 1 million residents, they would look at you like you're insane. Today we're living with these nevuahs unfolding before our eyes, and most people are not aware of what they're seeing. That's what the Gra says on the pasuk, "V'yakir Yosef es echo v'hem lo hikiruhu," that Yosef recognized his brothers and they didn't recognize him. He explains that in times of the Geula is going to be happening all around us, and people are going to be oblivious to it. Indeed, we're living in the Geula, and most people are not even aware of what they're seeing. That's why I like to say it says in Sefer Ezra that 42,360 Jews returned from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael to build the Bayis Sheni, to build the second base of Mikdash. On an average day in Ben Gurion Airport, it facilitates 50,000 people. On a peak day, it's 100,000. That means in one day, we're able to bring back more Jews than the entire return of Golus Bavel. Just people don't understand the enormity of what they're seeing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be living in Brooklyn, right? Well, why would, if you understand that that the Geula is unfolding literally before our eyes, there's no reason to live in Lakewood anymore. But if you just to understand that for the first time in 2,000 years, we have dozens of families of Kohanim that are living in and around the old city of Yerushalayim with Bigdei Kahuna inside their closets, ready to do the avoda. Dozens of Kolim that learn Kodshim in order to instruct them. We have rebuilt all of the Kalim in the base of Migdosh, with the exception of the one that can't be rebuilt, the Orna Bris, which was Nignaz, was put into hiding 30 years before the destruction of the first base of Migdosh. And for those that need to know where that's at, we know where that's at. We've found in Tchelis, we're in the process of rebreeding the Paraduma. We're light years ahead of where we're just a few years ago. Just most people are just totally oblivious to what's
they prefer to ignore all this, because if you accept this, then again, you have to accept the responsibility. Yeah. We're already pretty over time, but that's fine.
I just got it started. I'm just getting warmed up over here, but okay.
I would keep I would keep going, but I it's pretty hard for people to make it this far. I do want to end with one thing, just because this is something that this is actually a thought that I had last week, that came to me, and I think this is a perfect time to share it. Kind of ties together a lot of the things. Tcheles, the Israeli flag, and Eretz Yisrael. It's a little Dvar. I'll just give it over because I think this is probably a nice place to put it. At the end of Parshas Korach is the psukim of Tcheles. That's how the parsha ends. And so I was thinking to myself on Shabbos, what is the connection? There's always a connection whenever there's a juxtaposition of two stories. What's the connection? So the first thing that I was thinking was that you have we're told that one of the ways that Korach was trying to disprove Moshe Rabbeinu was he put on a fully tcheles garment, and he said, "Do I need to put tcheles on the tzitzis?" And Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Yes." And he said, "Why? If tcheles is is supposed to remind you of certain things, my entire garment is tcheles. So why do I need to put tcheles on the tzitzis also?" So I was actually thinking that this has there's a very deep Torah there in regards to Eretz Yisrael, and I think that For example, you have the Jews in the exile. They have Torah. They have the chesed and the mitzvos, and they have everything that they think that they need outside of Eretz Yisrael. So it's a very similar ideology that, I have everything I need. We're surrounded by Torah. We have BMG. We have everything we need. Torah is blossoming. Lakewood, Era, Torah. Why do I need Eretz Yisrael? And so that was the first thought. And then I was thinking, I feel like almost Tcheles represents Eretz Yisrael, or vice versa, because you have with tzitzis b'diavad, you can fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis without the tcheles. But lechatchila, you're supposed to have the tcheles. That is the way to perform the mitzvah. And I started finding all these interesting comparisons that Eretz Yisrael, it's also very similar. We can, according to many, you can't really fulfill the mitzvahs without having Eretz Yisrael, but the mainstream view is that you can fulfill the Torah without Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is lechatchila, but b'diavad you can fulfill the mitzvahs without Eretz Yisrael. And then the Israeli flag really started coming to me, because what are the colors of the Israeli flag? The Israeli flag is white with 2 blue stripes. That's exactly what Cheles is. And it's also not a coincidence that where is the mitzvah of Tcheles reborn, and where is it being practiced? In Eretz Yisrael. Very rare to find someone outside of Eretz Yisrael wearing Tcheles. People in Eretz Yisrael seem to be very, very pulled towards wearing Tcheles. I'm wearing Tcheles, you're wearing Tcheles. It's very common here. And it was just a nice Dvar Torah. I just thought there was a lot of very interesting comparisons, and the Israeli flag really tied it all together. Some very interesting things. Maybe I'm just crazy, but to me they made sense. So anyway, Josh, thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
Maybe we'll do another one.
Hopefully it wasn't too controversial.
No, I thought it would be worse. I was hoping it would be worse.
I'm holding back, but we'll see if there'll be a teaser for part 2.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll tell them, leave in the comments if you want another one of this. Right. The controversial one. This one was like rated G. We have a lot of things to talk about. Anyway, so shkayach, Josh, for coming. And hopefully some people learned some stuff today. I learned some stuff. And again, may the schus of living in Eretz Yisrael, of bringing back these mitzvos, and trying to rekindle our connection to Hashem in every single way, on every single level. May we be zeicha to see the Geula, which we are seeing. May we see the finishing.
That's what we daven every day. Hashem should open our eyes to see the Geula that's unfolding before our eyes. We just have to open our eyes and be able to be sensitive to it. We can see it is happening.
May we be zeicha to see it, what's happening, what's unfolding. Shkayach Josh.